അറിവില്ലാത്തൊരു പൈതങ്ങൾ ഞങ്ങൾ അടിപണിയുന്നഖിലേശ, നിൻ സ്തുതി പാടി പാടി വരുന്നു പൂർണ്ണത്രയീശ ഹരേ ഹരേ കൃഷ്ണ പൂർണ്ണത്രയീശ ഹരേ. അതിരമണീയം തവ തിരുരൂപം പൂർണ്ണത്രയീശ ഹരേ ഹരേ കൃഷ്ണ പൂർണ്ണത്രയീശ ഹരേ. അതിരമണീയം തവ തിരുരൂപം പൂർണ്ണത്രയീശ ഹരേ ഹരേ കൃഷ്ണ പൂർണ്ണത്രയീശ ഹരേ. പൂർണ്ണത്രയീശ ഹരേ ഹരേ കൃഷ്ണ പൂർണ്ണത്രയീശ ഹരേ. പൂർണ്ണത്രയീശ ഹരേ പൂർണ്ണത്രയീശ ഹരേ.
सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरते कामरूपिणी विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा. गुरुब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वर गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः. असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति
तेजस्वी नाबधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Namaste, and good evening to everyone. Hope all of you can hear me properly. There are a few new friends who have joined today's session, and some of them are not Keralites. I would request them also to pardon me if I actually sometimes speak in Malayalam, but everything that I speak in Malayalam would have already been explained in English, so you will not lose anything. So that is with that promise, let me start with the Yajurveda Shanti Mantra, which we started the whole session. Four Vedas contain 4 different Shanti Mantras, and the most important, I mean, all are important. One of the most important ones is this Shanti Mantra from Yajurveda, which is talking about the teacher and the taught relationships, and how that and the knowledge that is gained in every session, every learning process, add to the add to our strength as well as the strength of community and everyone else. So with that, we will get going. We will look at briefly at the topic that we covered in the last session, the first session. Fundamentally, we looked at the fundamental terms that probably the Vedanta study will start with. We talked about freedom and license, and about license, freedom without license being licentiousness. We indulge in the path of pleasure and then ruin ourselves. The human heritage, then we looked at human heritage, which is about the capability of the human being to transcend the limitations of the senses, the mind and intellect, and go one step up than any other living being. And the joy, the infinite satisfaction that we can actually gain by looking at the joys of the self as the joy of living, whereby our happiness can be, converted into an infinite form of bliss. And we defined happiness as the number of desires, selfish desires that are entertained, a total number of selfish desires entertained in that ratio. So that actually gives us the essence about how you can increase happiness. We also looked at the different kinds of activity classifications, the activities with desires, selfish desires, and without selfish desires. With selfish desires itself, selfish desires and unselfish. So we have the Vyavasai, Sevakari, and the Yogi in that spectrum. From the lowest Vyavasai, who is completely selfish oriented, to the Sevakari, who is selfless, but without, he may have goals and desires, but it is also selfless, and therefore Sevakari, and completely selfless and without any desires itself is Yogi, which probably we are not looking at, in the sense I don't claim to be a yogi, or assume any one of us wanting to become a yogi at this stage. At least let us become a very good Sevakari, unselfish, and raise that level of perfection to that level. Then we looked at the concept of standard of living and standard of life. The concept of living is about the affluence and other things that we normally talk about. But the more we get the standard of living, unless it is matched by standard of life, about the wisdom with which we work and cater to the joys of the inner self, that is the standard of life, then there is bound to be a problem. So the Vedanta philosophy talks about the raising the standard of life. And with that, we looked at the path of prayas, the path of pleasure, and shreyas, the path of good. What is the difference between path of pleasure and the path of good? And this standard of life is enhanced when we give emphasis to the path of Shreyas, the good. And for that, we need to, there are two ways of accomplishing this. That is gravitating towards the path of good or Shreyas, either by suppressing negative qualities or the desire, selfish desires to go after the path of pleasure, or by sublimating it through knowledge. So suppression and sublimation of the defined, were looked at. And then we generally started looking at the life itself as a unit of, units of experiences put together. Experience, where experience is defined as the experiencer plus the experienced and the process of experience, which is about the subject, the self within us, and the experience, the outward objects, and the relationship between the object and the subject. That is the process of experiencing. And then we looked at four personality types of physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual, PEIS, four types of personalities and their characteristics, and then defined the term samsara as the state of hope and despair, which arise out of the incongruence of the personality, the four personality types within. We have all these four personalities, and the physical personality wants something, the emotional personality wants another thing, the intellectual another, and the spiritual completely different. And there is a fight within us, and because of which we are pulled from this end to that end, and we keep on getting into that swing between hope and despair. That creates a problem within us, a personality problem within us, and the consequent contradictory, and because of which we establish contacts with the outside world, physical objects, situations, events, people, etc., with these contradictions surfacing within us, and that is called as samsara. So samsara is not about the physical things outside, but it is all about the way you connect with the outside world, and therefore the samsara is right inside us. Then we looked at, and to control this samsara and to optimize the samsara, our interaction with the world, then we need to control our mind and intellect. And for that, we need to understand what mind and intellect distinctions are. We looked at the mind and intellect as flow versus control, emotion versus discrimination, and in general as a slave and the master. The intellect should be the master. We looked at then destiny and karma. What is this, the law of destiny, and what is the law of karma? Three codes of discipline in the Sanatana Dharma, everyday codes, 4 stages of development of that in the intellect within us. And we are going to look at some of this, again, revisit this. But just to conclude, one more, equation we saw: man minus selfish desires is equal to God. So when we take away all our selfish desires, we automatically raise ourselves to the level of God. So these are the topics that we saw in the previous class. And today we are going to start with this law, the destiny and karma. Destiny, karma, and karma yoga. Let's be clear about those terms. We actually talk about these terms without fully comprehending what exactly it is, especially karma and karma yoga and all the way we use. And a lot of people use it in the Western world also, and karma and all. But then, the real gist of it you should understand. And then only, at least as the originators of this concept, we should know it much more than the people outside. Okay, so we will start with that central portion within the bracket, within the dotted rectangle here, defining the action. Any action gives rise to a reaction. And if you actually put more effort at this point in time, when the assuming that the reaction is happening now, then you can create another set of reactions which are different in flavor. Okay, but these actions and reactions are occurring in an environment. The environment or the circumstances also play a significant actions. It is not just your action. It is the environment, the circumstance also that play a role, to create the various effects, the reactions. This reaction, and actually destiny is defined as this action plus this environment is what is destiny. Okay. Now, if destiny was the sole thing, then that is basically what the Advaita Vedanta teaches us. So Advaita Vedanta tells us, if you put self-effort, purushartha, the wealth of the self within us, the wealth of divinity within us, the wealth of Atman, the self, is what is called as self-effort. That's self-effort reflect. That self-effort, if you put, we can change our now. The reaction or the environment or the point at which you find yourself in this today is because of the past actions. That is true. If we cannot change what is going to happen tomorrow, then there is no way we can progress. So the Vedanta philosophy tells us that if you put in self-effort, the tomorrow can be changed. And this process of putting in self-effort and changing the way things can be tomorrow, because today is the past for tomorrow, and tomorrow can be changed. So you have to combine all this. Karma is actually destiny plus self-effort plus reaction plus the modification. Together is karma. The reactions from the modification, etc., playing on your actions. So all this put together is a composite whole. That is karma. That is called karma. And now this self-effort, what kind of a self-effort do you put in? You can change from the reactions that have occurred today, or the bad situation. If it is a bad situation today, learn from that. Why this has happened. Try to analyze and understand why this is happening. Learning and then putting in the right and renunciation, etc. So that is basically what, if you look at the Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 2 to chapter 6, that teaches you that these processes, that is karma yoga. And that karma yoga, if you apply karma yoga, then it becomes not just karma, it becomes karma yoga. Karma yoga is therefore karma plus supreme motivations, plus right attitudes, plus enhanced aptitudes, plus renunciation, plus focus, plus enriched environment. So you can see the flavor of karma changing to karma yoga only when the strategies of karma yoga are applied. The strategies that are enunciated in a detailed manner from chapter 2 to chapter 6 of the Gita, which is again refined by the attitudinal changes that happen within your mind, which is called as bhakti, which is, the structure of that is completely defined from chapter 7 to chapter 12. And you can apply that only when the knowledge dawns on you, and the details of that knowledge is enunciated from chapter 13 to chapter 18, Jnana Yoga. So all these things combined together becomes a real karma yoga process. So this is how destiny, karma, and karma yoga and the flavors of it. So this past action in the past, present, the reaction and putting the self-effort is in the present, and the future is the final reactions and the enriched environment, etc., that can be created. So this is how we should look at it. Now, we don't have any control over the past. Therefore, we need to focus on the present. And we should not be worrying about what will happen. We can set goals, but don't worry about the results. So this is basically the process of success that is defined in the Karma Yoga, chapter 3, 30th sloka. So it is about without any regrets of the past and anxieties about the future. And in the present, focusing on the power of the self within us and supremely motivated by the joys of the inner self, you focus on the present, do what is required without any agitations, with equanimity, equipoise, dexterity of skills, etc. Equanimity of mind is Karma Yoga, dexterity of skills is Karma Yoga, selflessness is Karma Yoga. These three ingredients of selflessness put together into your actions, then it becomes a state of flow, dhyana, that is dhyana yoga. You get entrenched into a kind of, fully focused existence in whatever you are doing. And that is the state of flow. And that state of flow is basically, what you reach through the action. You become a karma yogi, which is this karma yogi doesn't mean that you are not a bhakta, because without bhakti in it, karma, you cannot become a karma yogi. And without jnana also, you cannot really become a karma yogi. So you need all these three things to be integrated, even though people look at it as three different paths to that goal. But it is essentially, it is an integrated one. In fact, the moment you become a real expert in karma, automatically, the next stage of refinement of bhakti comes in automatically, because of the strategies that you are, your mindset that is applied on karma. And doing that, you become enlightened with the knowledge of who you are, and jnana sets in, and you become identified with that self. That is basically the process ultimately, and that is the reason why Bhagavad-Gita is also arranged in that order of karma, then bhakti, and then finally jnana, and ultimately reaching the 18th chapter of liberation from limitations, moksha. Liberation from limitations. What is the limitations? The limitations imposed by the body, mind, and the intellect. On what? The infinite, the self that is within us. The infinite, which is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. So therefore, we are all powerful, and we have all the capabilities. We have all the compassion. We have all the dexterity of skill. Everything. The power to do that is there, but it has to express through your intellect, your mind, and the body, which is all conditioned by your ego. And therefore, you reach that stage only when this limitations, which is put over by, which is actually imposed on the mind, the intellect, mind, and the body by the ego. If you condition that and to fine tune it, it is becoming, you have the self, the power of the self can be tapped as it is. I mean, ultimately, theoretically as it is, but you can keep on increasing the capabilities and your influence on society and living behind. Therefore, ultimately, as human beings in the practical sense, our objective would be to leave a lasting legacy on the sands. It should not be that, 10 years or 15 years after your death, how people remember you is the legacy that you leave behind. And if you can, the years, the many number of years after your death, your legacy remains. That is basically what we should. And that legacy is basically, creation of that legacy is what Bhagavad-Gita is teaching us. And the creation of that legacy is the Advaita philosophy telling us to do, by tapping that infinitude from within, so that you are expanding to infinity, universalness, and then to infinitude as much as possible. Theoretically unlimited, but yes, keep on striving. Tomorrow, you should realize that you have expanded yourself more than yesterday. After, keep on incrementally expanding, expanding by incrementally reducing your selfishness in everything, thinking, every thought and action. The amount of selfishness that you bring forth, if you can incrementally reduce that, your expansion will be incremental again, and you keep on expanding the number of years that you live. And ultimately, at the end of it, don't worry about what kind of a legacy I will leave. But if you do this, you will be surprised at the legacy that you will be leaving at the end. When you breathe your last, the legacy that would have left would be tremendous. And that is basically what the Gita is teaching us as a practical tool for success in life. Okay, so with that is basically the law of destiny, the law of karma, and then what is karma yoga in a nutshell. And we also looked at the three codes of disciplines, which are laid out in Sanatana Dharma, and they are the brahmacharya, ahimsa, and satya. That is self-control, non-injury, and truthfulness. I had posted this list, so I am sure most of you would have gone through that list, and therefore the kind of fussiness that probably would have. Yeah.
You didn't post this.
I didn't post this?
No.
Oh my goodness, I failed in Satya. Okay. I had promised I will post it. Sorry. Okay, I will post this.
Karma, destiny. Is the reverse also true? Like if the
what is that?
action in the Karma is basically destiny plus self-effort and reaction. Plus
I mean, the karma,
modified
when you talk
environment.
about karma, it is not just your action. It is about the reactions, and then what affects you, etc. All that's a loop. All those things are put together in the karma concept. When you say, it is, I have seen some people say, you do something, as a sense of duty, responsibility, etc. And then sometimes people used to say, I'm doing my karma. I mean, that is really not right. Like, you are doing only your duty. Your duty and a karma implies doing your duties and also suffering the reactions of it, or enjoying the results of it, and the consequent reactions, all those things. It is a continuous loop, karma.
Sir, no. What I wanted to ask was, if the reactions are not good, is the reverse also true? If you're blessed with a good destiny and then
Blessed with a good destiny meaning what? What do you mean by blessed with a good destiny? What can you tell me your thought on that?
No. So circumstances in life. That's what.
Blessed with destiny, you immediately imply somebody is sitting on top of you and telling you,
Okay.
and giving you some kind of no, it is not that. It comes, I mean, of course, if you look at, I'm looking at it in a scientific sense. You will end up in an environment. It is not something that it is, it is something that happens in life because of various factors. Okay, let us not, go beyond that.
Happenstance. Yeah, a happenstance.
And if it is a bad circumstance and you are there, and you realize that there are issues with the circumstance because of certain reasons A, B, C, and D, you try to rectify situations A, B, C, and the problem and C as best as you can with the current, within the context of your problem. And instead you say, okay, you sit there. I got this problem A, B, and C because I was, I'm destined. So what do? I suffer. And if you sit like that, not what Karma Yoga teaches us, the Bhagavad-Gita teaches us. No, if you have to make a change. You have to do something to make a change for the better. Okay, not for selfish end. And what kind of change is it? It is advocating a change that is motivated by selflessness. Okay, value systems. So that is what that then only becomes Karma Yoga. Because karma that is unite yourself is karma yoga. Karma that is united with your BMI are selfish. Okay, which can be for personal gains, glory, gratifications, and you can make changes that way. Throw away your current circumstances by forcefully doing things for your own sake. Gita implies. Gita implies a selfless attitude and made it purely by the joys of the self. We have seen that in great detail when we covered Bhagavad-Gita. Okay, so that is basically what. I hope I have cleared you.
Thank you.
I mean, you're okay. So, sorry. In fact, I thought I had posted it, and so I'm actually sorry. In fact, I must say, as a practical example, it's this problem. I have failed in Brahmacharya, Ahimsa, and Satyam. Because I promised and I didn't post. Because, Satyam, truthfulness, I was not true. Ahimsa, I actually created tension in some anxiety and, disappointment in other people's minds. So I have done Himsa. Correct. It is not, I'm just trivializing the thing, but actually this is how, we break our rules. If you look at our practical scenarios at workplace, at home, etc., we can see these kind of things happening. And whereby we are flouting these what you call codes of discipline, and that only for that, in fact, I can, because I committed this error, I can very well, talk about it, and so you and illustrate this. So that is Brahmacharya. Self-control is something like, I probably would have controlled my time management and other kinds of things, whereby I would noted it down that I have to post it tomorrow or maybe something like that, and then made sure that I did it. So it is a question of control, self-control in the activities, and I failed there. So Brahmacharya failed, Ahimsa failed, Satyam failed. And so can you analyze your situation, all our situations in this fashion, and try to make sure that the errors or transgressions in these codes of disciplines are minimized? I think you will become much more better every day. Every day you can keep on enhancing. So this is the practical way, I think, in which you can apply the concepts of Bhagavad-Gita, the concepts of the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta. Otherwise, Advaita Vedanta is a philosophy. Because we always hear in Malayalam, there is always people keep on saying, oh, this Vedanta all this. That means we are belittling the philosophy of Advaita philosophy, really speaking, Vedanta philosophy, without knowing what exactly that talks about. That is the that is because we are not, we do not understand the gist of what this philosophy. So the gist of the philosophy is tremendous and applicable in everyday situations. And a typical example is this problem, for example, that I didn't keep my promise and failed the code. So this difference, the details of this brahmacharyam, ahimsa and satyam, I will list it out. I don't have to spend reading it out again, because I think I illustrated through a practical example. Okay, so, and then, as human beings only we will be able to do these things. No other creature will be able to follow these codes of discipline. And that is the, that is the envious position that we are in among the, all the species that live on earth. We have this special capacity. And that is what Adi Shankaracharya, mentioned in his, when he started that. And that's basically, so it was not part of this Advaita Vedanta philosophy fundamental study, but then I wanted to include that initially because, most of this people, the studies of Advaita Vedanta philosophy will refer to this, with this particular stanza. And that's basically what is from the Viveka Chudamani, actually, from Viveka Chudamani, Jandunam, Narajanmam, Durlabam, Adhapam Satwam, Tato, Vipratha, Tasmat, Vaidika Dharma Marga Paradha, Vidyatvam, Asmat Param, Atma, Anatma Vivechanam, Swanubhavo, Brahmatmana Samstudhi, Muttirno, Shadajanma Kodi Sukrudai, Punyair Vina Labhyade. That means it says, it is talking about the 9 blessings that we as human beings have. We have a mind and intellect, and that mind and intellect provides us with these blessings. So therefore, we should be grateful to that. It is what? Narajanma. The first of all, a mind. We have a mind, human birth. Pum Sattvam, manliness. It is not about sex differentiation. It is about quality of manliness, a courage of conviction. Viprada, sattvic attitudes. Sattva rajas tamo gunas, we have seen. Sattvic. Deviga sampat, Devasura sampat vibhaga yoga. We have studied the Deva characteristics, and Vaidika dharma marga parada. That is knowledge-based steadfastness in the path of righteousness. In the path of righteousness, not by blind faith. Because blind faith in righteousness, even if it is righteous, there is a danger of, giving it up when you face challenges. I've seen a lot of people doing. They want, because, in between obstacles, they start, complaining Bhagavad-Gita. Not the way they have approached the problem, but the wisdom itself is, is brought in as the culprit. That happens. Why this blind faith in the path of righteousness is suppression. And knowledge-based steadfastness is sublimation of negative qualities. Okay. That is Vaidika Dharma Marga Parada. And then Vidvatvam, right knowledge and the significance, the real wisdom of that knowledge. Atma, Anatma Vivechanam. Who is self? What is self and what is the not self aspect? aspects, understanding that Kshetra Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yoga, 13th chapter. Then Swanubhava, direct experience, and practicing it regularly and connecting with that inner self every day in every activity, thoughts that we have, directly experiencing it. And Brahmatmana Samsthiti, always being rooted in that motivation and not being led astray into distracting and negative thoughts. Dukkha Samyoga Viyogam. Okay, that is Brahmatmana Samsthiti. And in fact, that Brahmarpana Samsthiti is Dukkha Samyoga Viyogam, and that is the state that is described through the process of Dhyana Yoga, meditation. And Mukti, liberation. Liberation from limitations. Liberation from the limitations of the intellect mind imposed by the ego and therefore the senses and the body. And living in faith, in absolute confidence of the self inside. That is mukti, liberation. So the path from manhood to Godhead. Godhead meaning limitlessness is thus essentially a process of removing the hood, the covering of ignorance through a systematic process of understanding, contemplating and experiencing, understanding, contemplating and experiencing the ultimate reality. You experience through Karma Yoga, you contemplate and refine your body, mind and intellect, and you reach the state of understanding. That is it. So the experiencing is the process of Karma Yoga, contemplating is the process of Bhakti Yoga, and understanding is the process of Jnana Yoga. So the three things: understanding, contemplating and experiencing the ultimate infinitude that is within us, and working towards achieving the limitlessness in whatever thoughts and actions that you bring forth in this world, in your actions, in your professions, in your interactions with people and systems in society, in your family, within the relationships between the members of the family, everywhere you can apply this in minute things and achieve this state of Godhead, godliness, which is the limitlessness, and therefore raise yourself from simple manhood to that divinity. So adina, we should actually be grateful to these 9 blessings. Adana Viveka Chudamani starts with this prayer. In fact, okay, I wanted to, last class I didn't show you that Rudyard Kipling's the poem, If, it defines manhood. Just to give you an example. We don't have to spend too much time, but look at that. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, that is manliness. Right? Then if you can trust yourself, when all men doubt you, but make allowances for their doubting too. It is not an arrogance. But making the allowance for their doubting too, then it is manliness. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies. Or being hated, don't give away to hating. And yet don't look good, too good, nor to look too wise. That is manliness. Look at that. These things, if we can, that is basically what Viveka Chudamani, in Viveka Chudamani, Shankaracharya has alluded to as this Pumsattvam, the manliness character. It is not about sex. So, okay. So with that, I think we have, last week, the last 10-15 minutes where I had gone a little in fast. I have just covered that again. And now we'll get into this. The Vedanta philosophy is looking at Vedas and has codified this into 4 different sections. The Vedas into 4 different sections. We can see that as the mantras, the brahmanas, aranyakas, Upanishads. The mantras are they contains the hymns and the chants, the verses, mantras of the mantras and the hymns that constitute the mantra part. And the brahmanas are the ritualistic teachings of why you are doing that. I mean the mantras, and the aranyakas are the theological section. Talking about God and divinity and all those things. And the Upanishads is the significance, the inner significance of every mantra and processes that is defined. In fact, you can see that these are correlated to the 4 stages of the development of the human intellect, which we looked at in the last class, which is about the age of gazing, the age of observation, the age of scientific analysis, and the age of contemplation. Age of gazing, merely gazing at the phenomena of nature. I mean, people actually, that is when the mantras and all were formulated. I mean, typical examples, for example, sun. Sun was considered as God because we did not understand what this what this whole big sphere of fire was doing. Sun, by the name sun. Okay, we did not know. So we attributed, the people decided that it is the god to be prayed, and devised mantras to propitiate sun. And similarly, rain, water, all those things, made earth, everything, one by one. Age of gaze, people just gazed and wondered and then attributed that is God. It is not that it is wrong. It is actually only a part of God. That's all. A God meaning what is God is coming up later. I mean, we understood it later when the thought processes started getting enhanced. The second stage was the age of observation, the development. In the developmental stage, then gazing and looking at these things, people realized that there is more to it. That was a stage called as causation hunting. Causation hunting is we are going after the reasons why something is happening. That is called as causation hunting. So sun comes, from one side, and then there is light, and then after some time it goes on the other side, and so we started looking at why, the reasons for that. Similarly, for any physical phenomena in the nature, people started just not chanting mantras, but decided that there needs to be some understanding. And that is the age of observation, when actually the ritualistic teachings started. The Brahmanas were evolved. And so they actually put into process certain rituals and structure for these mantras and some of the activities associated with that. And then came the Aranyakas, the theological session, a little more detailed. That is the age of scientific inquiry, systematic analysis of observations, discovery of nature. So people actually, when they started looking for causes, causation hunting, made lot of mistakes. It became superstitions. A lot of things became superstitions when the scientific inquiry came in, because they realized that it is wrong, and then tried to correctly, through experimentation, found the real cause-effect relationships. That is the age of scientific inquiry, and that is when the theologies evolved. And ultimately, when people started looking at not just scientific analysis, but also the subjective contemplation on the nature of the self, and the inner significances, etc., evolved. The level of thought, contemplation, reflection, etc., evolved. The Upanishads came up. The last portion of the Vedas is called as Upanishads. Last portion, also the typical term that evolved was Vedas end, Anda, Vedanta. That is how Vedanta came. And the Upanishads are the Vedanta as parts of the Vedas. So that is how we evolved our human thought processes. This is why Adi Shankaracharya showed gratitude, because it is the human mind that enabled us to really evolve ourselves from the stage of mantras, brahmanas, aranyakas to Upanishads, to realize and to identify ourselves with that infinity, and not just rest with the fact that there is something super sitting there and we have to do propitiate and then get doled out by something. No, it is not that. You should, because you yourself are the divinity, but encased in limitations of body, mind, and intellect. And you have to break out of that, and therefore you can expand. And that's basically the Advaita philosophy talks about, that the infinite self is nothing but you. Tat tvamasi, aham brahmasmi, etc. That's the ultimate level of thinking that man can achieve. The Advaita Vedanta philosophy. Now, okay, therefore, the Upanishads started looking at more details. The Vedanta has therefore come up with what do you call, the anatomical study of the human being, etc. At those times, maybe 5,000-6,000 years back, and science, the material science had not developed that much. The thought process, intuitive thought processes of our rishis, is what basically is represented by these concepts that were elaborated in the Vedanta philosophy. Panchendriyas, we have 5 indriyas, the ear, skin, eye, tongue, and the nose, and which cater to the handling the specific types of medium: sound, touch, shape, taste, and smell. And the outer organs, eye, it handles the light, and then it passes it on to the brain, and within the brain there is a perception center that handles it, which is called as the Jnanendriya. Therefore, associated with each of the Panchendriyas, there are 5, each of them have one each of Jnanendriyas, that is the power to hear, the perception power to hear, the perceptive power to see, to touch, to taste, and to smell. That is the Stotram, Chakshus, Sparshanam, Rasanam, Kranam, Evacha. That is defined in the 15th chapter. Sotram, Chakshus, Sparshanam, Cha, Rasanam, Kranam, Evacha, Adhishtayam, Anastayam, Vishayan, Upasate. That infinite self sitting inside is enjoying the outer world through these powers of perception. The Jnanendriyas, the five Panja Jnanendriyas, Panja organs, Panchendriyas, and also 5 organs of action in the outside world, which is the power to speak, to hold, to move, to excrete, and to procreate. Vak, Pani, Pada, Payu, and Upastha, speech, hand, leg, anus, and genitals. The 5 organs, Panja Karmendriyas. And all of these, if you look at this, are rooted in the Panchabhutas. We have seen that also the Sankhya philosophy. Then in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, it is enumerated. Fundamentally, everything material is created out of earth, water, fire, air, and space. Basically, it is Shabda Sparsha Rasa Rupa Gandhang, this thing, the physical, the medium of that is earth, water, fire, air, and space. Bhumirap Analo Vayu Kam, 7th chapter, 4th verse. Bhumirap Analo Vayu Kam. That is, everything that is wrapping this infinite self inside, that outer casing is created out of earth, water, fire, air, and space. Power of self is then differentiated using that. Then this outer casing start working with their characteristics, individual characteristics, which will differ from person to person. And inside there is another subtle aspect, energy, that is working, which is about the pranas, the Pancha pranas. That they are the prana, apana, vyana, udhana, and samana. That is the power of the flow of respiration, the flow of evacuation of waste, the flow of circulation of blood, the flow of reverse actions, and digestion and assimilation. The 5 functions, the physiological functions that take place within us, the Pancha pranas. That is, that is actually defined. Aham Vaishwanaro Bhukta Praninam Dehamasrataha Pranapana Samayukta Pajamyanam Chaturvidam, 15th chapter, 14th verse, talks about this Pancha pranas, how they work through, and then convert this energy into physical realities. The power of the self becomes the consciousness. The consciousness becomes the life energy within us, or life energy becomes the consciousness within us, and then it powers your cells, every systems within you, creating all the energy systems and production of energy and all, ATP and all those things. I don't want to go into those things because I'm not an expert in those areas, but yes, it gets converted into that, and ultimately, and through the manas, buddhi, chittam, and ahangara, the andakarana, the equipments that translate it into thought and actions in the world. The manasa, buddhi, chittam, and ahangara. That is what, ultimately the andakarana works on it. Mano, buddhi, chitta, ahangara. Mind, intellect, memory, and ego. Memory or impressions and ego. That is the 4. We are going to look at some of these aspects a little more in detail. So that is from the Panchendriyas. Now we move on to the spirito-physical personality. This is the anatomy of human beings defined by Vedanta. What is it? The Atman inside, covered by 5 layers or sheets, called as the outer layer, which we see, the outermost is the food sheath, Annamaya Kosha, the vital air sheath or the physiological sheath, which is Pranamaya Kosha, the mental sheath, the mind, the emotional mind, the Manomaya Kosha, the rational mind, intellectual sheath, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and the bliss sheath, Anandamaya Kosha, which is just outside, which is the one which is nearest to the Atman. That is this Anandamaya Kosha is where our experiences, impressions, and all vasanas, tendencies, etc. get stored. So, the 5 koshas, Anandamaya Kosha, the innermost, Vijnanamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, and the Annamaya Kosha, outer layer. This is how the experiences are created. The experiencer, we become the experiencer when the Atman is encased in these 5 layers. Okay, so that we are able to connect with the outside objects and get that experience, the process, the feeling of experience, the process of experiencing as a jiva. That is how we become the jivas. The Atman, which is infinitude, the Brahman itself within us, now becomes transformed into a limited being in the individual called the jiva, with this Panchakoshas encasing it. This is the Panchakosha theory or of the Vedanta philosophy. And if you look at one of this, that the Pranamaya Kosha is further classified into 5, and that is the vital air sheath. Prana, Apana, Samana, Vyana, and Udhana. The faculty of perception. Prana is the energy of perception. And when we perceive things, there is a flow that is happening inside. In fact, when you perceive things from the senses to the, to our cortical areas, and then, flowing from there, signals flowing from there in the brain to the motor control areas. Before that, firing into the limbic system, and then to all the parts of the body, getting information, flowing it, taking it back there, and then finally we're taking a decision on it. And then all those perceptive power, the energy flow of perception is called as prana. The similarly, the faculty of excretion, is apana. So it is a flow which is outward, throwing it out. And then there is a faculty of digestion, that is the power of fire that is actually, digesting your food. This is what Vaishwanara, it is defined as Vaishwanara in the Gita. The faculty of circulation is the power by which the digested food is distributed to the various parts and assimilated. That is Vyana. And ultimately the faculty of thinking. While thinking itself, there is a flow inside. And that, the power to think, is a flow of neuron firings happening inside us. It's a flow of energy, and that is what is called as Udhana. This capacity helps man to acquire knowledge and to educate. Udhana is the one that helps us to acquire knowledge and educate. Therefore, keeping all these pranas in a healthy condition is an essential requirement for your expansion to even infinity, because you have to think and educate, that process. So prana, apana, samana, vyana, and udhana. These are the 5, the vital air sheaths. So man's architecture, or human being's architecture, or physiological architecture, or whatever you call it, all is embedded in this anatomy of the human being. The food sheath at the outermost layer, the physical things that we see, and then comes the vital air sheaths, then the mental sheaths, the intellectual sheaths, and the bliss sheath. Okay, that if the text is not clear, it is bliss sheath, the red one. And inside is self, the Atman. This is just a cut, a segment that is cut. So within that circular thing is shown on the right side, the Atman with the 5 layers. The bliss, intellectual, mental, vital, and food sheath. Yes.
So Udana says that it is a reverse actions.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, how is it a faculty of thinking?
No, it is not reverse. Udana is not the reverse one. The reverse is where is it written as reverse? It is a capacity to assimilate and and then absorb, assimilate new thoughts. That flow of energy for the thinking process is what is called as udara.
Okay. So what I had in mind, sir, was that, in the physiological aspects, like burps, that was udana is what I was thinking.
I mean, okay. The other thing that I want to tell you, in when living in this 21st century, there are certain things here that we should understand, because it may not match exactly with the scientific knowledge, some of the things, So don't go into further details and, in times of, and then getting, disillusioned, etc. No need. Just appreciate the thought process 5,000 years back for our rishis to think about these things, and without any scientific processes at that time, or the tools and techniques required to understand the human anatomy. But if you look at this, at least the functional levels, it is matching. Which, there are lots of things that are true. So that should be our feeling, instead of, worrying about the nitty-gritty of certain things, because absolutely there is, there may not find, they talk about the 3 nadis and other things, what is that? Ida, Sushumna and Pingala and all those things, if you ask someone from the medical profession, they will definitely not find those things. So, you don't have to worry about those things. Those are our thought processes at that time. We are trying to understand our thought processes, our heritage, that's all. But then in the functional level, there are lots of things that are still working true. And that is basically what we are focusing on. Okay, so that is the spirito-physical personality that was defined in the Vedanta. The Panchakosha Vivega. That is the discriminative capability, our discriminative knowledge about the 5 koshas. Okay, which are encasing the Atman. So these 5 koshas have been were classified into 3 bodies in the Vedanta. That is the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body. The gross body is constituted of the Annamaya kosha and the Pranamaya kosha. The food sheath and the vital air sheath together constitute the gross body. Therefore, the 5 organs of perception and the 5 organs of action is basically what it is. The gross body. And when our power of awareness, consciousness, when the consciousness is fully focused on the organs of perception and the organs of action, etc., then we are in the waking state, because we are aware of things that is connected, consciousness connected to our gross body. You are the waker, Jagrat, in the state of Jagrata or waker state. The mental and the intellectual state, Manomaya kosha and the Vijnanamaya kosha, together constitute what is called as the subtle body. It is it's not gross, it is subtle. We cannot see it. That mental and intellectual sheets form that, and it is constituted of the Antakarana, mind, intellect, memory, and the ego, the Manasa, Buddhi, Chitta, and the Hangara. The consciousness, when it is merely tied to the subtle body and not the gross, our gross body is sleeping, and that is the dream state, dreamer state, Swapnavastha. Now, innermost, the bliss state, the Anandamaya kosha, is called as the causal body. The Anandamaya kosha is called the causal body because it is the karana, the reason for the rest of the things to be working later on in the character in which it is expressing. So it is called as the causal body, the karana sharira. The bliss sheath, vasanas, impression, etc. are there. And that is the reason why you behave the way you behave. So it is the cause for the way you think and the way you act. So it is the cause, the causal body. The state, it is also called as, okay, for the time being, just take it as it is. It is the state of non-apprehension. Okay, that is now, the Vedanta is now getting into a different gear. Okay, this is where you will get confused. So I don't want to confuse you today with that, which we will take up next class. Okay, so I just leave it at the point that that deep sleeper state of consciousness, when it is tied to not even your dream, mental and mind and intellect, but only to the vasanas, that is when you are called as, you are in the sushupti state. Deep sleep. Just imagine when you are deeply sleeping, are you aware of anything? Are you apprehending anything? Nothing. Is it? People, even if somebody comes and switches on the light, etc., also maybe you will not realize that. Nothing. Because the physical senses are not working, your mind is not working, and therefore you are completely oblivious of anything. That is why it is called as the state of non-apprehension. Okay. From that state of non-apprehension, this non-apprehension state is basically ultimately what creates all misapprehensions. Okay. That is what we'll be seeing in the next week. Okay. So at the moment, don't worry. At the moment, it is more clear things that we are talking about here. Annamaya Kosha, the Pranamaya Kosha, the Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and Anandamaya Kosha engaging the Atman. When the consciousness within us is fully focused on the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha, then we are the waker, the Jagrata Avastha. When that consciousness is not connected to the gross, but only to the subtle, intellectual and mental, and the vasanas, of course, also, that is when we become the dreamer, the Swapnavastha. And when even that intellect and mind also goes from the scene, and you are fully in your Anandamaya Kosha consciousness, that is the state of non-apprehension, or it is called as the Sushupti state, the deep sleep state. So when you are active in the outside world, when you are in a dream world, and when you are in deep sleep state, you express your consciousness in 3 different ways. That is basically what is spirito-physical personality describes in Vedanta. Now, look at the subtle body. That is one thing that we need to understand fully. So that is the reason why I want to spend some time there today, instead of going into the next part. So the mental and the intellectual sheet. Mind, intellect, memory, and ego. Differentiate. Let us try to understand what it is. All of this, mental and intellectual sheet, nothing but thoughts. You can actually compress all the 4 into 1 and say that subtle body is thinking, thought. Subtle, what is subtle body? Our thoughts are the subtle body. But Vedanta classified the thought itself into 4. Naalaki mati. And the on the manasa, that is doubt or indecision. That is mind. In fact, when we see something in the outside world, from the object from the outside world, the experiencer, now in the process of experiencing, when the object from the outside world comes in, first it comes to the mind. The mind gets connected to that, and the mind is now having a doubt. What is it? What is it? What is it? That perception of something that happens with not much clarity is what is doubt and indecision is mind. And that then passes on to the next stage of the mind and thinking process, next stage of the thinking process, where the thoughts that help us to make decisions and determination comes in, which is the intellect, the buddhi. Then to take the buddhi to take that decision, we will need to fish out certain things from memories. So the memories are thoughts that are already stored but are not active now. So this thought now goes and fires up the thoughts in memory and then gets connected. So thoughts in memory are called as chitta. Thoughts that are not active, it is stored in memory, here chitta. That thoughts could also include impressions and experiences, etc. Previously gathered. And then it decides, when the mind says, I have a doubt, then only the buddhi comes in, and the buddhi says, I am deciding, then it needs help from the memory. Now, at this point, that process of my thinking, which says, I have a doubt, I am deciding, and I remember that assignment of ownership, that is ego, ahangar. That is again a thought. Ahangar is also a thought that assigns ownership to these things. My mind, my intellect, and my memory. I doubt, I decide, I remember. That is ahangar. Adana ahangaram. But that ahangar is a fundamental aspect of our physical existence. Okay. Now the thing is that how will you sublimate this ahangar? that ego, ahankara will still be there, but the sublimation process is only to make sure that, empowering the intellect to decide on using the power of, the value of selflessness. That is sublimation. Okay, we'll get into that later. But at the moment, just have a thought, think about it. Just think, for the next 1 week, you can think of these things whenever you get time. The structure of our mind, the subtle body. And this is basically what makes us, and helps us to do work in the waking state. ജാഗ്രതയായിട്ട് നമുക്ക് ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ ഈ പറയുന്ന മനസ്സാണ് നമ്മളെ കൊണ്ട് ചെയ്യിപ്പിക്കുന്നത്. മനസ്സ്, ബുദ്ധി, ചിത്തം, അഹങ്കാരം എന്ന് പറയുന്ന 4 തോട്ട്സിന്റെ 4 വേരിയേഷൻസ്, the 4 what you call strands of thought. That is what manas, buddhi, chitta and ahankara is. That is called as the antakarana. I hope it is clear. And this now, with this 5 sheath, the 5 sheaths or 3 subtle bodies. Okay, don't confuse. 5 sheaths, 3 subtle bodies. Because there are, the gross body is 2, subtle body is 2, and then of course the causal body 1. So 5 sheaths. 5 sheaths are covered as 3 bodies: gross, subtle, and causal bodies. And inside sits something, the experiencer, the real experiencer, the power. It is actually the power that gives us the faculty of experiencing. Okay, that is Atman. We can, at this point in time, just give some indications of trying to understand who the self is. So at this stage of the Vedanta philosophy, we'll go more and more into this. But at this point in time, let us understand the indicative descriptions of the nature of Atman. But the Atmavine petitula anveshanam. Atman is that which transforms insentient matter into sentient beings. At least understand that. Your physical body is nothing if there is no Atman. So Atman gives the power, and therefore it energizes the mind and the 4 levels of thinking, etc. That which manifests as the waker in the outer world, the dreamer in the dream world, and the deep sleeper when you are sleeping, in the 3 bodies, the gross, subtle, and the causal bodies. That which manifests as the gross body, the gross waker, the subtle dreamer, and the causal reason for everything else. And it is the substratum behind all the manifested changes at the material level. In fact, if you look at it, all the memory, mental sheath, intellectual sheath, etc., vital sheath and food sheath, if you look at everything changes in your life. Maybe if you live for 80 years, 100 years, it changes, completely changes. Everything, physical, and even the mind changes. The emotions and intellectual condition, your knowledge, you acquire knowledge, everything changes. Thinking, your thinking capability changes, everything changes. But despite all these changes that are taking place, just like the waves in the ocean, the waves in the ocean, those waves are all existing on that deep ocean. And that ocean, that substratum, which is the screen on which all these changes are being projected, is the Atman. Okay, you can look at it that way also. That is the reason why when you get up, you say, I got a very good sleep. Yesterday I slept very well. Today I didn't sleep. Tomorrow I don't know what will happen. And all those kind of thought processes come in. Because there is somebody who is a witness to all this. And that is that consciousness within us, the power of consciousness within us, that gives us this continuum of experiences. The continuum of experiences. Experiences knit together is life. And that life becomes a whole because of the continuum of this energy, which is called as the Atman, the conscious, the power of consciousness that comes in. So if you look at this now, just look at just look at this again in another analogical perspective. Just look, think about a triangular room. The walls are shown there with some perforations, one completely shielded black or something, and white on one side, slots, red slots on the other side, and glass, something like that, And inside the room, what will happen? You can see the sun, no? The sun is reflected, sun is inside because it is getting diffused into the room from the outside world through these pores. And the light inside is also the sunlight only. And there is the sun outside. Okay, bright sunlight outside, diffused sunlight inside. All of you can imagine this situation, right? Now, let us look at this way. Exactly the same thing. Our ego, intellect, and the mind are these three walls. And inside that area, the room, the space in the room is our chitta, the memories. And then, therefore, what happens? It is filled with what is called as this diffused light, that is conditioned consciousness. Think. And suppose you melt away that ego, mind, and the intellect. What will happen? It completely transparent. It becomes, let's say, transparent glass. Inside you will have pure consciousness. Full sunlight. You think about a triangular room with full glass, transparent glass, sunlight, sun beaming into it. Full sunlight you will get inside. But therefore you pull filters there, and then you have got only diffused sunlight. This is what is happening for us. Infinite consciousness everywhere. And our physical body with the ego, intellect, and the mind is encasing the memories. And the memories are now becoming a conditioned consciousness. Our thinking becomes a conditioned consciousness. And it reflects the three walls characteristics: ego, ahankar, characteristics of the mind, emotions, and the intellect, the rational thinking, analytical processes, makes it conditioned. And this is each one of us, every one of us. In fact, every one of us is pure consciousness. But we get wrapped up in this ego, intellect, and mana. So you can sublimate ego through karma yoga, you can sublimate mind through bhakti yoga, and you can sublimate intellect through buddhi yoga. That is jnana yoga. Karma, bhakti, and jnana yogas you can. And then the conditioned consciousness merges with the pure consciousness. Chitta becomes clean. And that is how liberation is obtained. So this is the philosophical aspect of Vedanta. And now apply this, in your actions, selflessness, dexterity of skills, and right attitudes in your actions. Then focus the mind with practice and determination to make sure that you enhance your capabilities existing and creating knowledge so that you can acquire new knowledge, etc. The mind becomes expanded, and then polish the intellect with the discriminative capabilities of understanding what is right and what is pleasure, the path of pleasure and path of good, that is the prayers and shreyas. And then you will find your mind becoming clear and seeing the holistic picture, so that you come out with excellence in every action, every thought and action that you perform in this world, which is tuned to sustainability, expansion, and inclusivity, etc. That is basically the practical aspect of it. So sustainable actions, inclusive actions, and enriching thoughts become your forte when your ego is sublimated like that, and your mind is purified, and your intellect is directed towards the goal. That is basically the process of Advaita Vedanta philosophy to make you a man of perfection. And that is basically what the Gita is teaching us through all these chapters, 18 chapters. Now, if you look at this, I am stepping into the advanced shoes now, but not going to go through that in detail at this point, because we have hardly 10 minutes, which we will see, because I would just want to create the link for the next class. So basically, it is all about the same thing is what is in advance described in the Mandukya Upanishads. Some of you have already, we have gone through this when we looked at Bhagavad-Gita chapters. So it is these states of waking state is called as, there is a term for that waking state, man, the waking state personality, which is called as Vaishvanara, the dream state personality, which is Taijasa, and the deep sleep state personality, which is the Prajna state. Okay, so three terms: Vaishvanara, Taijasa, and the Prajna. All, ultimately going down to that substratum, which is supreme bliss, Atman. At the bottom. So you can see that, we have the Tejas, Vaishwanara looking outward, the consciousness looking outward, the Tejasa, the consciousness looking inward, the Vaishwanara looking outward, Tejasa looking inward, dream state, and Prajna looking nowhere, but in that blissful, near bliss state, which is all based in this bliss, absolute bliss, which is Atman. Okay, that is what is represented through our, the intended with our mantra chanting, starting with Om, A, U, and Ma sounds. And that A, U, and Ma sounds working through, from that process itself, depicting this state of consciousness within us. So these things we can actually look at in detail in the next class. But how these things are tied together, we can see now. Quickly have a look at that. It is like this, the whole Pancha Bhutas creating this universe, the sun and the skies and everything. Okay, created of earth, water, fire, air, and space, Panchabhutas. And then within the individuals living on earth, we have the mind, intellect, ego, and the impressions, the Andakaranas, and empowering the organs of perception, vital layers, and organs of actions, Karmendriyas, Pranas, and the Jnanendriyas. Jnanendriyas. So these are the things that sun, one, the sky is taken as one entity, earth, water, fire, air, and space, 5 entities, mind, intellect, ego, and impressions, 4, organs of perception, 5, vital layers, panchapranas, 5, organs of action, karmendriyas, 5. So 5 plus 5 plus 5, 15, plus 5 plus 4, 9, that is 9, 24, and 2, 26 things. Okay, this is how we are encased. That's basically what we were talking about now as a summary. And that is in the 7th chapter also, it is described as Bhumira Panalo Vayu, Kam Mano Buddhirevacha, Ahankaram Idiyame Bhinna Prakritir Ashtada. Those details are given there. Mentioned in the Gita also, as summarized there in 7th chapter. So that aspect is what is basically defined as the Atman. Everyone, this is the state everywhere. When we die, this is the state. Atman, because it is infinite everywhere, and it was there even before we were born, and it will be there even after we are dead. That power that helps this power of existence, gives us the power of existence to be anything. It is the absolute power. That supreme bliss. On top of that, suddenly some physical things come in, and we go into the causal state, the prajna state, which is tuned to the universal consciousness, which is about the universal energies, tapping the universal energies, the infinite coming into the universe and becoming the universal energies which get tapped into a physical cell or group of cells and things like that, or and then giving you that universal consciousness state. At that point in time, we are in tune with the at that point in time, Vedanta says we are in tune with Ishvara, the Lord of the universe, because that's the power which creates this and sustains this universe. And then suddenly the dream state, the mind things comes in, all these 24 things, the space, the earth, the water, air, and organs, the head, ears, vital birth, stomach, feet, body, and all those things. So the circles depict those items. Panchendri, organs of perception, mind, intellect, memory, and the ego, the vital layers, and the organs of action. 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 4 plus 1 plus 1. Those things. That suddenly it encases all that, limits that infinite Atman into but then it is not conscious of the outside world, it is inner world, Taijasa, as the Taijasa. And the senses start sprouting upward. The consciousness is taken into the outward world to connect with the things in the outside world, becomes the waking state, the Vaishwanara looking outward. Same thing, but looking outward. That is the waking state is superimposed on the dream state. The dream state is superimposed on the universal state consciousness, and the universal consciousness is superimposed on the infinite. It is as layers of superimpositions that is happening onto the infinite self, which this is what we will be seeing more in detail. I'll explain that again in the next class. And that is basically what the described by The word Om, it starts with that Mandukya Upanishad. The Om, the concept of Om is derived from this. Of the Vaishwanara, whose field is the waking state. Of the Taijasa, whose field is the dreaming life. And of the Prajna, which is of the deep sleep state, substrated on Supreme Bliss Atma. So that is actually as an essence of the Mandukya Upanishad. And we will see a little bit more of that, so that we'll tie up all this Vedanta knowledge, previous things, together into a conceptual whole, and see the Upanishad personality that we have, described in the Mandukya. And the conscious, that it is nothing but how that infinite consciousness is now getting into our individual, becoming the individual consciousness and expressing as our intellect, mind, and the body and the senses, the power, etc., and connecting with the outside world. Okay, so with that, today we will stop. So what did we see today? We today saw destiny, karma, and karma yoga in little more detail, so that I hope we have understood, all of us have understood that, and also looked at the 9 blessings of human beings, to pay gratitude to those powers. And then we looked at the classification of knowledge in terms of the Veda knowledge, Veda classification of knowledge, mantras and Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishads, MBAU, and how the human intellect's development has influenced the formation of these Vedas. And then Panchendriyas, Panchakoshas, and the Panchapranas, and the spirito-physical personality of the human being. How that Panchakoshas have been classified into 3 bodies: gross, subtle, and causal bodies. And also, with respect to that, understanding the self. And a more advanced understanding of the self through the Mandukya Upanishad was just opened up. More details later. So let us conclude now, and if you have any doubts, we can discuss.
Om